the brand new Mini Countryman. This starts at around $38,000 for the Countryman S all-4, which gives you all-wheel drive, but nobody's paying that because by the time you add on some packages, this is in the mid-40s. This car is about customization. Outside has real color options, and you can do some interesting stuff on the interior. But I have the John Cooper Works all-4, the big boy, the faster one with more brakes, more power, you name it. And again, when you kind of put things on here that you want, this is well over $52,000, and you're probably going to wind up leasing these things, to be honest. I'm going to get more into that in a minute. When you look at this, this is a vehicle that is probably going to attract people like me who were raised by guinea pigs as a kid, so you want something different. You want to be quirky. The outside is non-traditional. It's very bulbous, but recognizable instantly as a Mini. So you don't want a big car, but you want the storage and you want some of the comfort aspects of an SUV, and this does this well. Door storage, interior storage, the way you put your phone in here for wireless charging, some of the fabric pulls, you know, just, it all works really well. The back seats are comfortable. You're gonna fit car seats in there if you opt for that. The rear storage is pretty good for a hatchback. It's a more squared off look. You know, I do really appreciate what they're trying to do here without giving you a monstrosity of a vehicle. But my excitement was definitely hampered after about 2 days of driving this, and this is not something you're going to pick up on a test drive, so I'm warning you right now. Not having a gauge cluster and putting up this plexiglass little HUD is very reflective, it's harder to see, and it's kind of in line of sight, like popping up. It looks super generic, combined with the plastic dash on the upper part. As much as I love the fabric across this, I can't help but think it looks very Dodge and very like Chevy Cruze, where they gave you kind of fabric across the dash that is going to be very difficult to clean and keep the dust out. And I think the biggest thing that really broke it for me is the infotainment, the circular disc on the center dash, and it looks cool at first. But it is definitely a broken piece of software. It's laggy, it's slow to operate, it's really clunky to get around HVAC controls. You have to do a lot of packing, tapping. You can't figure out where everything's at. And you know, even if you bypass that and just go to Android Auto and Apple CarPlay, both Jack and I'm on Android, Jack's on Apple, and this thing just constantly is disconnecting during your drive. In fact, it disconnected 6 different times for me and reconnected in a 20-minute drive. And to me, that is a massive problem with this. And the fact that you have to struggle with it being your primary source of input, because almost everything's in the touchscreen here, you know, that's something you're really gonna have to look at before you commit to this, especially if you're buying it. I mean, if you're leasing it, you could probably deal with it for a couple of years, but that's a major thing. Things like inputs, start stop, we're gonna talk about during the drive. Brake pedal calibration is really weird as well. Like, you're in a slow parking maneuver and you hit the brakes and it's like head to the steering wheel, how it just slams on the brakes. There's little details here that I don't think that they figured out. Audio system, the Harman Kardon sounds like a tin can. The mid-range is so grating that it actually physically fatigues your ears, and I think some of it is tweeter placement. Again, there's so many little things that add up here. It's such a cool concept and such a cool car, but I think long-term ownership is not as good as the commodity vehicles just because they broke so many of the regular things on it. But anyway, we're gonna get in the shop and then we're gonna take this for a drive.
In the shop with the all-new 2025 Mini Countryman. This is the 3rd generation. The trim we have is the JCW, or John Cooper Works. If you've watched our BMW X1 or X2 video, or our most recent Mini Cooper Hatch, a lot of this is going to be very, very similar. This is essentially the mini version of the BMW X1, X2. It shares the identical wheelbase those cars have and the same powertrain options. A 2-liter B48 with mild hybrid paired to a 7-speed dual clutch and a front-wheel drive biased all-wheel drive system. Compared to the older Mini Cooper Countryman, the 2nd generation, this 3rd gen is their largest ever CUV SUV. It is like 5 inches longer and a couple inches wider. This is the largest vehicle Mini Cooper has ever produced, which basically makes it not a Mini. This is a CUV SUV. They have done their best to make sure this has fairly reasonable aerodynamics. The 2 trims you get in the ICE format is this JCW or John Cooper Works, or the Mini Countryman S. Same dual clutch, same all-wheel drive setup. However, when you go to the JCW variant, they change the motor mounts. They optimize the pistons and connecting rods. You get a different exhaust and a different intake system, and obviously much different engine tuning. You get larger brakes, and you get slightly wider wheels and tires. This is supposed to be that more entertaining, stylized take on the N-list variant of two-row premium-ish CUVs that are available to you. So with that, let's go take this for a quick drive with Mark.
The Lord has spoken. A not boring family SUV, Jack.
Big engine noise.
You hear the all four?
I do, Mark.
All four, does that mean all four wheels are turning?
Yes, unlike the last Mini Cooper, which you decided not to grace me with your presence for, this is also an UKL2. This has the same engine and gearbox, but you now have all-wheel drive.
Whoa, she's really taking this drive to the next level.
This is the JCW trim level, the actual one, not the style package. So this makes like 300 horsepower, 0 to 60 in the mid to low fives. Honestly, at least the engine tuning in typical BMW or Mini fashion is quite proficient. Yeah, it's a fast car.
And we're on winter tires, mind you, for this, snow tires, and it still has, it actually drives really well. The all-wheel drive system definitely helps a lot. There's still a little bit of torque steer in there. You can't get away from it, but you never want for any additional power. Now the power band is, while we're talking about the engine, it feels pretty narrow. You know, there's that, where that boost is at versus, you know, power, it seems to fall off quite a bit at the higher RPM. So you got to know what you're getting into. And again, you're buying this because,
I mean, it's a very boosted 2-liter, right?
Yeah.
It's con though, like every car on this platform. So BMW Mini now have a dual clutch for its front-wheel drive platform, and it's not the fastest. I still think like a ZF8 speed would be faster, or you know, smoother to engage. And the stop-start, which is really hard to actually demonstrate when you're driving, is abysmal.
Yeah, and you know, we go back and forth and talk about this. Out of any brand in the industry, we constantly say that BMW has some of the best drivetrain tuning outside of Porsche in the industry, like by far. There's just no competition in terms of internal combustion and torque converted automatics and even their dual clutches. But here it just,
in their M cars, their previous dual clutches were great.
Yes,
this is not.
Yeah, and this is one of those, like, you don't notice it. Jesus.
Let me get you out of go-kart mode.
Please take me out of the fake engine noise mode.
You're back in core, sir.
All right, perfect. You don't notice it when your foot to the...
Yeah, come on. It's got to make a noise whenever you change your drive mode.
So I don't even know what I was saying.
You don't notice it.
You don't notice the dual clutch problem when you're going foot to the floor or flat out, but you do notice it when you're actually driving like normal, and that's where it becomes very, very frustrating. I was driving the other day on the way to just the store, and I came to a stop, and the start-stop system like cut out the engine fine, but then it abruptly just restarted out of nowhere, and I thought somebody hit me. Like, that's how hard the engine restarted and the knock that it created in the car. It's just, you know, again, for BMW being so good at drivetrain tuning, this one, and sounds like the previous Mini that you drove, it's really rough.
If you're, say, you're in a grocery store parking lot and you're coming up to a stop sign and people need to cross and you need to go, there's typically a very perceivable delay between when the stop-start needs to cut back on so you can pull away from the stop sign.
Yeah.
Stuff like that is not great. I do think, to your point, the reason why someone would buy a vehicle like this, again, it is expensive. This is basically $52,000.
Right.
Is in a sea of very boring two-row SUVs. This has some degree of personality to it, and we talked about in the interior space and in the shop side. You know, is that personality worth some of the deficiencies this car has? Because while it is a Mini, while it is a John Cooper Works, and it does have all-wheel drive, it's still an SUV thing.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, it's not a sports car. It's not designed to be a sports car.
This is a hard one, dude. I mean,
you know, it handles well.
This is what you want to talk about. How well does it do the actual fun to drive parts? Because, you know, my significant other her sister has a Mini Cooper.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons why she wanted it, one, it was quirky and it was small. And this is one of the things that we have a really big problem with in our country is everything's huge.
Yeah, every SUV's enormous.
Everything's too big, and this kind of blends, and I won't say it's as functional as an SUV, but you have 4 doors, you have a hatch, you can use it when you don't need a massive vehicle. I really do appreciate the fact that the footprint of this isn't so humongous and it still has nimbleness, namely with the all-wheel drive setup. It does feel very nimble to drive. This is, again, to your point, it's not a sports car thing, but it still brings some fun to it. It brings some character to it, and ignoring the interior, I think people that want the quirky experience think Kia Soul on steroids, like those types of vehicles. This does everything that you want it to do, but it's not an enthusiast car, and that's why we're like, when I titled the last video, I said they were throwing in the towel. I think they're throwing in the towel on the enthusiast market, and this is just bringing character to a dead segment of like soulless SUV, CUV things.
Yeah, it's only 2 cons, something we didn't address, is despite this being $52,000 in a JCW product and a more premium car, it doesn't have adaptive dampers, so it is sprung fairly stiffly for an SUV. We're on snow tires, which have softer sidewalls, and this still has some pretty big impacts that make its way into the car, so it's not the most comfortable vehicle. And the gearbox calibration with the stop-start isn't great. But what you get is a great engine for a 4-popper.
Yes.
And for a really well-handling small CUV thing that has some level of personality. You're just paying for it.
You're paying a lot for it. And if you're one of those people that wants this, we just talked about that with the ID Buzz, maybe proficiency, it's not, you know, like there's 2 different people that just like what this is, and the people that are really hardcore enthusiasts that look at the technical proficiency part where this doesn't meet that, but it checks so many other boxes, you might really enjoy this.
What other small SUV has personality though?
The Mazda3 Hatch is the only thing that I think that can compare with this in terms of like mentality of do it all, somewhat fun to drive, all-wheel drive.
Luxury thing?
But
that's also $35,000 and doesn't compete directly with this.
I know, I'm just saying that's the only other thing I think of.
The toenail.
The toenail? Yeah, if you want to get an Alfa Romeo, I think there's just not a lot, and this is what it does great.
All right, Mark, so with that, let's head into the final thoughts, sir.
All right.
Final thoughts on the Mini Cooper Countryman JCW. So what do you need to know about this $52,000 BMW Mini Cooper CUV thing? Well, the thing it does well is the Mini thing, which means lots of interior and exterior customization, almost boutique levels for sort of a basic premium car. I think it has a lot of personality, at least on the inside, and the B48 and JCW guys makes a lot of power. Its cons are some of that personality on the inside means not the best usability. It also has a not great stop-start system. It torque steers despite being all-wheel drive, and the dual clutch is not great. You can forgive some of its driving dynamics because you have lower expectations versus the Mini hatchback, because after all, this is a CUV, not a hot hatch. I'll also say, despite being on snow tires, the fact that this does not have adaptive dampers at $52,000 means the ride quality is definitely on the firmer side when you compare it to some of its competitors, like an Acura RDX A-Spec, one of the Audi or Mercedes options. I think you're really going to have to like what Mini has to offer to buy one of these things, but if you do, I think you'll be pleasantly surprised or pleased. So thanks for watching. Hope to see you again soon.